Hello, friends. Welcome to another episode of My Journey with Keagile Moloabi. Now, every Wednesday, I share something from my journey, not because I have everything figured out, but because I'm learning to walk with God through the things that I don't understand. And that's actually what I want to talk about this evening. What is it that I'm learning about faith in my season of waiting? Because the truth is, I am still waiting. There are things in my life that I have prayed about for a long time. There are things I hoped would have happened by now. There are things I thought would look very different at this stage of my life. And the truth of the matter is that waiting is not always easy. Sometimes you can have faith and still have a lot of questions. You can believe in God and still wonder, God, when? How? Why is this taking so long? Did I even hear you correctly? And I've had those questions myself. But then I've come to the realization that having those questions doesn't necessarily mean that I've lost my faith. It means that my faith is being tested. And the Bible tells us a lot about faith. But one thing we never talk about is what happens then when you believe? What happens when you've prayed but nothing changes? What happens when you've obeyed but nothing, you don't seem to see any results? What happens when you've believed for a long time and you're simply tired of waiting? My own book was written from that place, from the road, not from the finish line. Because I was writing it for people who believe in God but don't always understanding Him. People who are waiting while their prayers remain unanswered and their faith is being tested. And that's where I also find myself too. But I think one thing God is teaching me is that faith changes in the waiting. Because when everything is going well, faith can feel very easy. When you can see progress, when doors are opening, when prayers are being answered, it is so easy to say, God is good. But what happens when nothing seems to be moving? And that's exactly where faith starts becoming deeper. And I'm learning that faith isn't always about knowing what God is going to do. Sometimes faith is simply trusting who God is when you don't know what He is doing. And that's a very different kind of faith. It's the kind of faith that says, God, I don't have all the answers. I don't know when this will change. I don't know exactly what the next chapter of my life looks like. But I still choose to trust you. And I'm learning that this kind of faith is quieter. It's not always dramatic. Sometimes it looks like just getting up in the morning and continuing, praying one more time, doing what you know is right, taking care of your responsibilities, continuing to work, continuing to serve, continuing to hope, even when you don't have the evidence that you're hoping for. And there are still things that I am praying for. There are still dreams that haven't unfolded yet. There are still areas of my life where I don't have the clarity that I would love to have. And I'm learning not to pretend otherwise. Because I don't want to come here every Wednesday and speak as if I've arrived somewhere that I haven't. Because I'm still waiting. I'm still learning. I'm still hoping. But I'm also still believing. And perhaps that's what faith looks like sometimes. Not having all the answers, but refusing to let the absence of answers make you abandon the one that you trust. And one of the things I've written in my book is that faith is often formed between the space between what God has said and what our eyes can see. That space can be very uncomfortable, but it doesn't mean we have been forgotten. And that's exactly what I'm learning. Waiting is not evidence that God is doing nothing. God is doing something in us that we cannot see yet. The waiting is forming patience. It is teaching us dependence. It is changing our priorities. It is teaching us to trust God with the outcome and not just the process. And sometimes we simply have to keep walking without knowing exactly where the road leads. And so, if you're watching this today and you're also in a season of waiting, I want you to know something. You don't have to pretend that waiting is easy. You don't have to pretend that you don't have questions. You don't have to have perfect faith. Bring your questions to God. Bring your disappointment to God. Bring your tiredness to God. Just come as you are, but keep coming back to Him. Because I'm learning that faith is in the absence of questions. Faith is choosing to trust God even while some questions remain unanswered. And perhaps that's where some of us are right now. Not at the fulfillment, not at the breakthrough, but somewhere in between. And maybe that's okay, because God is still working. God is still faithful. God remains God, and the story is still being written. I'd love to hear from you today. What is it that God is teaching you in your season of waiting? Share with us in the comments, because your answer might be exactly what someone else needs to hear. Until next Wednesday, friends, keep walking in faith, and remember, God is faithful between the promise and the fulfillment. Blessings.